Hi, I'm Ernie Conover. Turning is a great hobby because other than a lathe and some tools, you really only need a grinder to sharpen those tools and a bandsaw to bring wood down to a size that you can get it in your lathe. When I sold my old shop last year and built this new one, I knew that I couldn't bring my 3 bandsaws with me. And so I sold them all and bought one that does everything. The last 15 years has seen great development in bandsaw design. 10 to 14 inches has traditionally been a standard workshop bandsaw size, but few of those bandsaws had a height of cut that was greater than about 6 inches. You could often buy a riser block that you put between the 2 halves of the cast iron frame, but that made them terribly rickety. I sold such a 14-inch bandsaw that I'd used for years in my turning shop, and I don't miss it at all. New bandsaws tend to be a welded steel frame or a very heavy cast iron one-piece frame. And they all have heights of cut that is a minimum of 11 inches in a 14-inch size. This 18-inch Rikon saw has a 19-inch height of cut. That's because bandsaw manufacturers realized that a lot of woodworkers wanted to resaw boards and take a big thick board, make it into 2 thin boards without planing it all away and wasting most of it. Other innovations in bandsaw design have been much better dust extraction. While my old 14-inch Delta only had a little tiny dust port down here and most of the dust ended up inside the machine or on the floor beside it, this saw has 2 4-inch inlets right down here, and this one pulls the majority of the dust off, but this one finishes the job and there's nothing left inside the saw. It all gets sucked up and goes into the cyclone right here. Other innovations are tension releases. Almost all saws have a tension release today so that you can untension that blade. It makes it quick to change the blade then, and also keeps you from wearing out your tires nearly as fast. You're taking all that wear and tear off the rubber in your tires. This saw also has an electrical lockout that you can't start it with that tension release. If your saw does not have that, make yourself a red tag that when you throw that, you come over here and lay it on the table, because if you start it, you usually screw up the blade. This saw also has a foot brake, a common feature on bandsaws today. It also electrically stops it when I touch that brake. So it turns the saw off, and a shoe, like a standard shoe brake on a rear of a car, stops that saw pretty fast. By government regulations, all bandsaws have to have a crank height adjustment on the top guides. And that's a nice feature. Bandsaws come with a fence today, or it's an optional accessory. It's a good accessory to have. However, there is a problem with a fence on a bandsaw that you don't have on a table saw. And that is the blade sits on 2 crown tires. The tires are rubber tires and there's actually a little crown to them. So where that blade sits on that crown tire will dictate where this saw tracks. And your fence doesn't always line up with that, and if you change blades, it'll change where it tracks. Whereas older saws, you had to undo a couple of bolts and play around with it. The modern ones are very quick to adjust. So the way to do this is start up your saw, and I have a line drawn on this piece of wood. I'm going to hold it down now. and hit the brake. And I've just told myself where this saw is tracking. So I'm going to bring the fence over in close proximity, and I'll just turn this and dial in the correct tracking for this fence. And now I'll be able to cut parallel pieces very easily. And there we are, straight as an arrow. It's very dangerous to cut rounds in a bandsaw or a table saw by just putting it down on the table, for it wants to roll into the blade. It's going this way, same with a table saw. And it will jam up, blade can snap, pull the piece around, bad things can happen. Often as turners, we're cutting green pieces to length, or rounds like this. So a very easy accessory you can make is a little V-block that I have put a wood strip that is 3/4 inches wide, the size of the miter slot there. And I have cut 2 45 V-blocks. And all I have to do is to put the piece in here, and I can easily cut it. I need to raise my height to cut a little bit. I'll hit the dust blower. There, I very handily cut that piece, and the ends are square, so I'm ready to go to the lathe. In a previous article and video, I showed how to rip a piece of a log into slabs for making bowls with a chainsaw. Not everybody owns a chainsaw. Not everybody's comfortable using a chainsaw. They are dangerous tools, and some backyards can't stand the noise. This new breed of bandsaws really allows you to do these rip cuts in logs in the bandsaw quite easily. I measured this log, and it was about 11 inches in diameter. It's a bit oval. It's a piece of black ash. But I cut it to about 12 inches to have a length that's a bit longer than its widest width. And I've drawn parallel lines here. I'm going to go through the center, and then I'm going to go to either side. In a bigger log, I would go either side of center and then cut multiple slabs out of it. But I have the bandsaw opened up to a little higher than this piece. I'm going to line it up here. But I've made this very simple shop accessory for the bandsaw by simply cutting a V-notch in a heavy piece of wood. And this will allow me to push this through here without getting near that blade. And I never like to push this kind of stuff this way, because if you slip, you're going to go into the blade. I do it this way, and I actually use my whole body like this, and I eventually get up to where I'm against the edge of the saw, and I don't have any chance of falling into that blade. So let me show you how this works. I'm going to start up the dust blower, start up the saw. There's our first slab. And there are our slabs of black ash. We can now go over and lay out circles and cut rounds. I'll show you how to do that next. This big Rikon actually has a lower table than most bandsaws because it's built for resawing, and that makes getting the boards up on the table and so on a lot easier. Same with this heavier green wood I'm working with. So I'm going to cut this. Again, I'm going to keep my hands well away from the blade and use sort of prying, pushing with my thumbs, but not my whole upper arms as I do this. There's our finished bowl blank. That's a nice sized bowl. It's good to put a heavy coat of paste wax on your bandsaw table on a regular basis because this green wood doesn't friendly to cast iron. I'd like to speak a little about blades. Here's a 1-inch wide resaw blade that I use for resawing thicker boards into thinner boards. But for all of this green wood cutting of bowl blanks, I use a 3/8 wide 4-tooth hook, and it's 0.025 thick, the blade. I buy it in 100-foot coil stocks from McMaster Carr. I can buy this for about $75, and I can make 7 blades for this saw, so it's pretty economical that way. To do it, I lay out a 13-foot section of blade on the floor, cut it, and then I grind the 2 ends on a grinder. I put it together in a jig I made, and I silver solder it together. I then use a Dremel rotary tool to clean up the weld. Big thing is be safe and have fun.